Hello, learners. Welcome to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. I hope you all are doing well, fantastic. And today, let us discuss the Block 2, Unit 5 of the main dimension perspectives on the study of Indian society. And the Unit 5 deals completely with Marxist perspective to study Indian society. And in this perspective, we are going to also discuss the contributions of D.P. Mukherjee and A.R. Desai. Okay, I hope you enjoyed seeing Unit 4, where we were talking about ontological perspective and structural functional perspective. So when you talk about Marxist perspective, now generally when you talk about Marxist perspective, we are talking about in terms of conflict, why conflict arises between the classes. We were discussing about various dimensions connected with exploitation of the superordinate class exploiting the subordinate class, right? So similarly, when we try to understand Indian society from a Marxist perspective, what are the key dimensions? Let us try to understand that. So basically, Marxist approach focuses on the conflicting forces. Why conflict takes place in the society and between whom the conflict is taking place, and what are the different kinds of contradictions which are inherent in the society. And in this context, there is a lot of overemphasis on the role of traditional factors, especially when you talk about Indian society. We cannot talk without caste, right? So, traditional factors such as caste, kinship, religion, and also the subtle role, not very strong role, a subtle role of class and focus of change and the inherent contradictions in the society. Whenever we talk about class, as you can recall, or as you might have read, what Karl Marx said, that whenever we are talking about class structure, we are definitely talking about mode of production, right? So, in Indian context, this mode of production not only is connected with the entire concept of class, but also connected with caste structure, power structure, kinship, family, and that is why we have to examine all these factors. A. Rudra, Banaji, Utsa Patnaik, Chattopadhyay, N.K. Chandra, Ranjit Saul, Bhaduri, Pradhan Prasad, they all have been recognized and acknowledged for their Marxist perspective in their respective studies. The most basic Marxist thinking in India was done in the 40s and 50s, and interestingly by the non-sociologists, right? So initially, sociologists were not focusing so much on Marxist perspective. Non-sociologists were using more of Marxist perspective. And the study of Indian social reality from Marxist perspective has been conducted by scholars like M.N. Datta, Kosambi, A.R. Desai, D.P. Mukherjee, P.C. Joshi, Irfan Habib, Chattopadhyay, and several others. And among the early sociologists who emphasized the significance of the dialectical model, they were D.P. Mukherjee, A.R. Desai, and Ram Krishna Mukherjee. So now let us take our discussion further and try to understand the various components and elements of Marxist perspective with specific reference to Indian society, right? So when you're talking about Indian society, you all are aware that a very significant period of modern India was a colony of the Britishers. So without understanding, without acknowledging, and without focusing the tidbits of the caste structure, tidbits of mode of production during British period, our discussion of Marxist perspective cannot be complete. And the nature of dominant mode of production was generated by the British impact on India, and the nature of changes generated by British as consequences of adopting measures such as introduction of private property in land, new modes of revenue collection. You all might be familiar with Zamindari system, Malbari system, right? Ryotwari system. It also contributed to commercialization of agriculture administration of hierarchy, and new principles of recruitment and promotion. Whether Britishers expropriated power from kings, feudal lords, and others, or created new feudal classes and they shared power with them. So this is a very significant component during British period. Whether it is also important for us to examine that whether and to what extent British introduced a bourgeoisie economic system without facilitating a kind of a capitalist mode of production in agriculture or adequate industrialization or strengthened the dominant mode of production. The characterization of strata such as zamindars, who were the landlords, tenants, sharecroppers, bonded labor, agricultural labor, etc. How did it operate during British period? And because India has been land of villages, India has been an agricultural country, until and unless we don't understand about land as mode of production and the different classes which were created dependent on the relationship with the land, we will not be able to do complete justice to Marxist perspective. And because in Indian society, caste has been such an important component. So in this particular context, caste also comes into the picture because for a very long time, usually upper caste people were also the owners of the modes of production. They were holding the entire control over the mode of production, which was land. And like when we try to understand that how the working conditions in rural areas were there in the pre-capitalist period, okay, but operating and serving the capitalist world market. So during colonial period, of course, a very strong kind of a capitalism was not existing, but India and Indian products were definitely being used for the capitalist global market. And the different types of socio-economic formation which has emerged in India after independence. So we will have to understand and examine that is it a neo-colony or are we operating at a peripheral level of capitalism, or is it a satellite formation or a backward capitalist social formation? So we have to assess and evaluate Indian society from all these perspectives, from all these angles, according to the Marxist perspective. And especially after independence. Now, of course, close to 200 years, we were a British colony. But again, after independence, what was the nature of the state which emerged and how did it help to shape the economy and society of India, especially on the basis of mixed economy? As most of you are aware that Indian economy has been a mixed economy with simultaneous presence of public sector and private sector. And it is also very important and pertinent for us to understand that what should be the nature of revolution which has to be brought in India. Revolution in the sense, what will make Indian society more egalitarian in nature? This is a very important component to be understood, evaluated, and explored. And when this revolution is about to come, or who will be leading this particular revolution? Now, if I can take you back to Karl Marx, I'm sure many of you might have read and understood the deeper insights of Karl Marx theory. So Karl Marx very clearly says that in capitalist stage, he's talking about different epochs, right? Different epochs starting from ancient stage, feudal stage, then he's also written extensively about capitalist stage. So during capitalist stage, the revolution was led by proletariats. That is the working class, right? So now it is very important for us to understand from Marxist perspective that which class will be leading this particular revolution, and which are the classes which will ally, which will come together, which will cooperate with this leading class, and which class will remain neutral, that okay, I'm not part of this revolution, and also act as an enemy against whom revolutionary movements will have to be studied. So, Marxist perspective is definitely a very interesting perspective because India is a wonderful example of caste class mixes. So, if we have to understand Indian society from Marxist point of view, it becomes very important that we understand it in terms of mode of production and how this mode of production is connected with the concept of caste and class. Now let us proceed further. And now I bring to you T.P. Mukherjee, Dhurjati Prasad Mukherjee. His lifetime, as you can see, is between 1894 to 1961. And D.P. Mukherjee is popularly called as D.P. He was an outstanding Indian philosopher, and his interests were very, very versatile. He was into multiple things and just not in sociology. He was also interested in economics, literature, music, and art. And see, that is what has been the USP, right? Distinct feature of many of the Indian sociologists, that they have been very versatile. And because of their versatility, their understanding of Indian society is also very beautifully, very, their narratives are very beautifully explained. And that is why whenever we are going to read such kind of traditional Indian sociologists, our understanding of Indian society develops further, strengthens further, right? And he was deeply interested to understand the nature and meaning of Indian social reality rooted in Indian tradition. We have to understand one thing here, my dear learners, that when Britishers understand Indian society and Indian tradition, their perspective is a different perspective. When Indian sociologists try to understand Indian society, which is so deeply rooted in Indian tradition, definitely this understanding will be slightly different. He was also equally interested to find out the ways how to change it. Bringing social change in Indian society was also very, very important for promoting welfare of the common people by adapting the forces of modernity. And he has very strongly contributed to the perspective of Marxian sociology in India. So as you can see on the screen, is wide range of publications are Basic Concepts in Sociology, Tagore, A Study, Introduction to Music, which he wrote in 1945, Modern Indian Culture, Personality and the Social Sciences, imagine, which he had authored in the year 1924. Apart from this, you can see the list, these are some of his very well acknowledged and identified writings. Apart from this, he was also, he holds a very strong position in Bengali literature as a novelist, essayist, and literary critic. So, just for a second, if you close your eyes and think about his versatility, it is definitely worth praising, right? Now, what is D.P. Mukherjee trying to say? Let us try to understand that. He is trying to present a kind of an encounter between tradition and modernity, right? Because in Indian society, we cannot completely confine ourselves to traditional understanding, not purely to modernity. So, what is this encounter between tradition and modernity, and what are its consequences? Right, so he's trying to explain those consequences in terms of conflict as well as synthesis. So he's saying that the interaction between tradition and modernity can be understood in terms of conflict and synthesis, and he's trying to classify Indian traditions under primary, secondary, and tertiary. So primary traditions have been primordial and authentic to Indian society. The secondary traditions were given second ranking. especially during medieval period when the arrival of Islam and Muslims in the country has taken place. And by the time British arrived in India, India became a British colony. Hindus and Muslims had yet not achieved a full synthesis of traditions at all levels of existence. This is a very interesting observation, what he is making. And there was a greater measure of agreement between them regarding the utilization and appropriation of natural resources, and to a lesser extent in respect of aesthetic and religious traditions. And apart from the primary, secondary, what is the tertiary traditions talking about? It is talking about the conceptual thought and the differences which were surviving from it. So basically, Mukherjee says that sociology will help us to have a kind of a integral view of life and social reality. Then he is also talking that Marxism gives an idea of desirable higher stage in human society, and he is also expressing certain inhibitions, certain doubts about to what extent, to what level of efficiency can Marxists analyze Indian social phenomena? This was his natural curiosity. Then he also suggests that Marxists would analyze everything in terms of class conflict. But in our society, class conflict has for a long time been converted by the caste traditions. This is what I was telling you in the beginning, that caste class nexus is very, very strong in India. And because of this nexus, Mukherjee is also saying that new class relations have not yet sharply emerged. We have to remember which time period Mukherjee is making this observation. Many of them are more or less ignorant of the socio-economic history of India. I think we all will agree with us. Many of us, despite claiming to know everything about socio-economic history of India, we all are still very ignorant. And the way economic pressures work is not that of mechanical force moving a dead matter. Traditions have great powers of resistance. So it means if someone is so strongly rooted in tradition, will have greater resistance to change. But some wise person has said that nothing is permanent except change. And in fact, in Indian society also, we are witnessing a lot of changes in our traditions. DP is also emphasizing that the immediate duty of Indian sociologists is to study Indian traditions. Only then we understand Indian society. DP was against the positivism of Western social sciences. So he was not very keen that we should focus on Western social sciences. And he is talking about, see, this is a very interesting point. DP is talking about our conception of man is Purusha. See, Purusha Prakriti interaction and not individual or Vyakti, right? When you're using the word Purusha, you are talking about more holistic individual. Here we are not focusing on one single individual, but the concept of Purusha, which is interconnected with so many other dimensions in the environment and in the nature. The word Vyakti rarely occurs in our religious texts or in the saying of the saints. In fact, or any religious text you take up, there is concept of Purusha which is more prominent. Purusha or person develops through his cooperation with others or around him, through his sharing of values and interests of life with the members of his group. Very interesting point. Very interesting. And then needless to say that the contributions of D.P. Mukherjee has been very, very significant, and he was deeply influenced by Marxian thought, and he firmly believed that Indian social reality could be properly appraised only in terms of its special traditions, what Indian society holds, special symbols, and special patterns of culture and social action. So, if we are not comprehending this kind of special features and traditions of Indian society, probably we will not be able to do full justice to understand Indian society. And this is what D.P. Mukherjee is trying to tell us. Now, let us also bring into our discussion A.R. Desai, another very prominent name, and you all must definitely read Social Background of Indian Nationalism by A.R. Desai. It is a must read for all Indians, I personally feel. It is beautifully written, where different stages of Indian nationalism has been explained. With regard to Marxist perspective, he's trying to apply a kind of a dialectical historical module in his sociological studies. So A.R. Desai, Akshay, Ramanlal Desai. Beautiful name, right? And he closely studied the works of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels and the writings of Leon Trotsky. So probably has derived his inspiration from them. And he's also studied macro meso capitalism, nationalism, the classes and agrarian structure, how are they interacting with each other, the state and peasant movements, among other things. Then, moreover, Desai's Marxist sociology used the historical method to give specific meaning to Marxist notion of structure and the various elements in its constitution in India. So, see, using this historical method is also trying to focus on various important concepts like feudalism, capitalism, relationship between class and nation, peasants and working class, post-colonial state, and the rights of the deprived. So after independence, how has Indian society or state evolved? This is a very, very interesting observations. Several observations has been made by A.R. Desai in this regard. And Desai is talking about a kind of a interdisciplinary sociology where there is little difference between sociology and social science, which use the method of participant observation and field work. So he's saying that we will be able to understand Indian society in its totality only if we are using the methods of participant observation and field work. Just by staying at home, you will not be able to understand Indian society. And he is also one of the pioneers of the modern Marxist approach to empirical investigations involving bibliographical and field research. See, of course, when we are trying to make an effort to understand Indian society and develop very deep insights to understanding this, there is definitely a need to have an empirical investigation, something which is based on evidence and not based on our subjective ideas, right? Only then we will be able to present a scientific study and understanding of Indian society. And he is clearly rejecting any interpretations of tradition with reference to religion, rituals, and festivities. So Desai has consistently applied Marxist methods and is also rejecting any interpretations. He finds that dominant sociological approaches in India are basically non-Marxist, and Marxist approach has been rejected on the pretext of being dogmatic, value loaded, and deterministic in nature. Desai is making this observation that in Indian context, Marxist approach was not very, very, popularly utilized. It was not very favorably utilized. We were more comfortable with using non-Marxist approach to understand Indian society. And the relevant approach, according to Desai, what is he saying? Is a Marxist approach. Why is he saying? Because it can help us to study government policies as well as caste and class system into state apparatus and political economy of the state and society. So there is definitely a lot of weightage in what he is saying. And as you can see on your screen, his important works, rural sociology, in social background of Indian nationalism, I made this observation in the beginning. He has also written on peasant struggle, rural India in transition, India's when it comes to development, right? Uh, we have seen Gandhian model of development, capitalist model of development, socialist model of development. Now, in Indian context, what Desai is saying that India's path of development, Desai also developed the field of political sociology in 1960s. So, if you have to understand the trajectory of India's development path, political sociology can also offer multiple insights in it. And he's also studied Indian society from Marxian perspective, and he has tried to use history in a very, very fruitful manner. Social background of Indian nationalism and recent trends in Indian nationalism, it has tried to reflect on the development of capitalism in India. Though the narrative is freedom movement, but simultaneously, this book also talks about how capitalism developed in India. And according to Desai, the state formed in post-independence period is a capitalist state. Though we say that we are a mixed economy, but Desai's opinion is we are a capitalist state. And here the administration plays a dual role of protecting the property classes and suppressing the struggles of the exploited classes. So this was the observation made by A.R. Desai, and in one of his very, very popular essay, The Myth of the Welfare State, Desai provides a detailed critique of this notion and points to it many, many shortcomings. So it's trying to, focus on several shortcomings. And then the important contributions of Desai on major themes are village structure, transformation of Indian society, social background of Indian nationalism, peasant struggle, state and society. And if we if we are implementing Marxist perspective, then all these dimensions have to be taken into consideration. Then India's nationalism is the result of material conditions created by British colonialism. This is definitely a point to be rooted upon, point to be explored further. That to what extent has British colonialism contributed in evolving the material conditions of India? And Desai thinks that when traditions are linked with economic relations, the change in the economic relations would eventually change the traditions. So he's trying to link traditions with economic relations. Desai is also trying to argue that property relations are crucial because they shape the purpose, nature, control, direction, and objectives which is inherent or which is underlying the process of production. Then, even when explaining about property relations, he's saying that it is a property relations which determine the norms about who shall get how much and on what grounds. It must be observed, like especially when we try to conclude our discussion on A.R. Desai, it must be said that the usefulness of Marxian framework to understand India's reality is very, very interesting. And in fact, all the significant writings of A.R. Desai, they have reflected Marxist approach to understand Indian society. So, friends, in our earlier unit 4, where we were talking about ideological, structural, functional perspective, and in this Marxist perspective, see, Indian society is the same, but the way you look at it, the way you want to understand it, that can vary from person to person. And that is why, if we have to understand Indian society in its totality, right? Understanding different perspectives will definitely help us to, get much deeper insights into Indian society. Now, like let us say, ideological perspective. It is trying to view Indian society from the point of view of text, what has been mentioned in various ancient texts about Indian society. And that is where we were talking about Manu, Louis Dumont, right? And even G.S. Fourier, who is considered as father of Indian sociology. Then in structural functional perspective, our focus is more on the structure of Indian society and what is the function of the different parts of the structure of Indian society, where we were talking about M.N. Srinivas, very uh, popular sociologist in India. And when you talk about Marxist perspective, definitely D.P. Mukherjee stands very tall. A.R. Desai stands very tall in this connection. So now, just now, I have discussed about Mukherjee and Desai. Now, for a minute, please close your eyes and think that despite they both being Marxist, what has been the orientation of D.P. Mukherjee and what has been the orientation of A.R. Desai? And when we try to do such kind of comparisons, we are also able to appreciate that how beautifully Indian sociologists have tried to, even despite being from the same perspective, D.P. Mukherjee's orientation is definitely different from orientation of A.R. Desai. And that is what is the beauty of the different thinkers who try to perceive and view society from their point of view. So let me conclude this particular unit. I hope you all have understood and you have trying to make some notes out of it, and uh, you have made up your mind to do little more readings to comprehend your understanding about Marxist perspective. And in this particular Unit 5, we have discussed about two very prominent thinkers, D.P. Mukherjee and A.R. Desai. D.P. Mukherjee's contribution has been very versatile, and he's trying to focus in terms of understanding traditions and how traditions are interacting with modernity. Is there a conflict? Is there a synthesis? Or both is existing? This is his very distinct point in his discussion. And when you talk about A.R. Desai, definitely his focus is on understanding everything connected with the agrarian social structure. He's talking about caste, he's talking about class, he's talking about mode of production, and that is why this offers a slightly different flavor to understand Indian society. So, friends, I encourage you all to do more and more reading on this, to take up research, more and more research on Indian society, because as I mentioned in the conclusion of Unit 4, Indian society is evolving. It is so dynamic in today's time, and very interesting insights can emerge from all of your research. And you can always reach out to me through Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. I'm Dr. Vinita Pandey from Department of Sociology, Veeranari Chakal Yelama Women's University. So continue learning, continue exploring, enjoy your learning. That is my bottom line all the time. That whenever you are learning, you enjoy that learning. So I hope you have enjoyed this video, you have enjoyed this lesson, and I will meet you very soon with another Unit 6. In that, we are going to come up with another perspective connected with Indian society, right? So happy learning. See you all. Bye bye. Thank you. Take care.